Welcome to Dialogue. Chinese President Xi Jinping has concluded his first overseas trip of the year, a 5-day tour of Southeast Asia with visits to Vietnam, Malaysia and Cambodia. The trip marked a deepening of ties with all three nations, and it comes at a time of growing global economic uncertainty. So what message does this visit send amid ongoing disruptions to global supply chains and an escalating tariff war? And how will China further strengthen its economic and trade partnerships with Vietnam, Malaysia and Cambodia and the broader ASEAN region? And what role will the world's second-largest economy play in shaping today's global landscape? Join us for this discussion live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Rong, Chair Professor at Sichuan University and Senior Research Fellow at China Institute of International Studies. Digby, Wren, Chair of Belt and Road Capital Partners and External Relations Advisor to the Royal Academy of Cambodia, and Susanna, Tjhin, Director of Gentala Institute, Indonesia. Welcome to Dialogue. So, Christine, I will start with you. So, the three countries in 1 week, how do you summarize the achievements of President Xi's trip to Southeast Asia?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I think it's quite a momentous visit at a time that we desperately need for regional coordination, especially with the changing of this new global economic that's been happening after the Liberation Day, quote unquote. And this kind of visit is actually quite important, definitely because the region in the past has been showing a lot of resilience when it comes to maintaining their coordination and also integration. And it's been sort of like proven during the pandemic period and also during the critical era when proxy wars has been happening in Ukraine, in Sudan, and also in Gaza. So this kind of like similar approach has to be implemented during this explicit period of time, because without the regional coordination, there is no way that region can survive this kind of like disorder coming in.
Digby, the last leg was in Cambodia and where you are. What did you see as some of the highlights of the trip?
Oh, well, the highlights of the trip was the king, for the very first time ever in Cambodian history, went to the airport to greet a head of state. So that tells you how important it was. And 37 agreements were reached, most of them related to economic development and education, and I suppose that strengthening the shared future, because Cambodia has signed up to that in a big way. And so all in all, I think it's been very successful. And maybe we'll talk about some of the agreements they made later. But the big ones were connecting the canal to the Gulf of Thailand, of course, and deepening the industrial corridors and supply chain corridors and what they call the fish and rice corridor. So all in all, a very successful trip.
Rong, of course, as Digby mentioned, there are, let's say, infrastructure projects like in Vietnam, in Cambodia, and of course there is also like artificial intelligence, technology sharing, digital transformation, that kind of cooperation too. Dozens of agreements, MOUs, like with Malaysia, with Cambodia, with Vietnam. I mean, that's very fruitful. Of course, from the Chinese point of view, this is a part of the efforts to modernize the Chinese nation and, of course, individually, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. So how do you see these projects, their contribution, or what kind of role they play in the process, industrialization, modernization of the nations here?
Indeed, I think the visit by President Xi, the first ever sort of overseas trip for this year, certainly is a major sort of diplomatic event, and also I think served as a testament of China's head of state diplomacy. Politically, I think that the visit itself very much highlight China's continued sort of commitment for a stable, steady development relationship, and which I certainly very much depends on the political trust. And we have seen that the 3 visits all very much helped strengthen and deepen the political trust. I think that is the most important thing. Secondly, of course, the 3 countries, during the visit, President Xi has also exchanged, as a matter of fact, formulated a blueprint for further deepening practical cooperation, which is utmost importance for their respective development and modernization drive, taking into account the vision that has been reached with the 3 countries on building a community with a shared future. Lastly, I think it's also very much noteworthy is the cultural aspect, people-to-people interactions. We have seen that the 3 countries, President Xi, during the visit, he mentioned the various kind of projects, and also I think very much, of course, responded by the enthusiasm of their guests, their hosts, of further deepening that cultural exchange, civilizational dialogues, and particularly among the younger generation, students and others.
Mm-hmm. I would say, Rong Ying, if you take a close look at the trip, of course, basically during every stop, President Xi, published a signed article, sharing his vision with, of course, his hosts about how to develop a bilateral relationship in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Malaysia. Do you find a common central theme probably in those articles there?
That's a great question. I think the central theme for the 3 the visit, definitely is development. The development, the high level or high quality development, which is, as I said, that very much related to the context, the backdrop. On the one hand, China has now pursued its own modernization, aiming at high level, high quality development. While all the 3 countries that have been visited, they are also adapting and pursuing their development modernization drive in line with their conditions. But the context and the environment is changing. As we all know, geopolitically, the tensions, but the most pressing challenges comes from the economic and trade front, as we have that trade war, the abuse of the tariff by the Trump administration, causing a lot of problems, disruptions. I think the week before, ASEAN, economic ministers, they had an urgent meeting and came up with a very strong worded statement about expressing their deep concerns and of the negative impacts and the consequences on their development, on their right of development and the future of the development. So that very much echoes to the theme that President Xi's visit that has brought into it.
Yeah, indeed. Christine, some Western media have drawn attention to the timing of the trip, of course, suggesting it may be a direct response to the ongoing global tariff war there. For example, New York Times noted the trip could highlight a growing contrast between China as a reliable partner and unpredictable United States. What's your take?
The fact that coordination between China and Southeast Asian Southeast Asian countries have a long history and pretty much a lot of successful examples from that. While the timing of it, I think we should look at it as a more momentous, as responsive and proactive when it comes to the coming crisis that we are all facing together. So I think in a sense that it's actually quite timely for the visit to between and to have the meetings between all these countries in the region. So I guess this kind of misperception, and some probably deliberate, some actually came from ignorance, but pretty much the kind of importance that we have to put in this visit is that we have a lot of stakes together to be faced especially when it comes to developing future prosperity together. And in particular, I am quite sort of like what resonates for me from one of the three writings is the ones that President Xi Jinping made in Malaysia, saying we must harness the momentum of collaboration at the multilateral level. That very much resonates to the reality of the region, especially when it comes to tendency to undermine the multilateral frameworks that's been happening. And, we still have to maintain and also protect the multilateral frameworks that we have all this time, in which, of course, ASEAN and also BRICS at the same time are playing quite an important role. And this is, I think, an opportune time to find ways to have a optimal synergy between the ASEAN-based mechanism and also the BRICS mechanism, especially with the fact that we do have three key member states of ASEAN showing interest in participating in BRICS. So this is really timely to have this meeting and also to have further consolidation and also coordination.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a common, massive, common ground here at stake. Digby, the context we mentioned, the tariff war, of course. Basically,
yes.
The nations here involved in the visits and themselves, facing steep tariffs, 49% for Cambodia, 46% on Vietnam, and 24% on Malaysia, for example. 49, 46, that's unbearing, intolerable probably for business leaders there. For nations grappling with such a pressure, President Xi's visit here, the offer of deeper cooperation, more integration. So can that be seen as that is naturally will make China like a stabilizing force? And also be consistent, predictable, long term.
Yes, that's exactly right, Tjhin. It's for me, it's specifically about that. It's about stabilization, consistency, and consolidation. On the back of good neighborliness, which has been the long-term policy of China. That has never changed. It's always consistent and it's reliable. People can rely on it. Nations, countries can rely on it. Now, a 49% tariff on a country like Cambodia, I think the first estimate was they would lose something like 1 million jobs. And you can imagine that would just devastate the country. So clearly, President Xi's trip is a sign of stability. And it's also a sign that everybody should be working together. That's very, very key. It's a shared future. And I think everybody has understood that message. And as the other speaker mentioned, there was a finance ministers meeting in Malaysia just prior to President Xi's arrival. And they are all looking to ways to consolidate what they have and then take advantages of new markets. And the vast capacity of China for imports, that's extraordinary. The Americans have spun it that China needs ASEAN because where are they going to send all their exports that would have gone to America? They need to send them to ASEAN and so forth. But clearly this is not true. It's what's going to happen is it's all about new markets, about the developing and emerging economies, and it's about all of them being lifted together, and then they also have greater demand and fitting in, specializing in the supply chains. Developing the supply chains a lot better. So in Cambodia's instance, it's not trying to compete with other countries. What it's trying to do is establish where it has a comparative advantage, and then enter into the supply chains. For example, between Vietnam and Thailand in their car industries. Things like that, and upgrading all the technical capacity that goes with that. Education is key in Cambodia, and technical education, and digital payment systems, all that kind of thing. Integrating all of the payment systems is really key as well. Offset the dollar, you don't need to use the dollar for that, and so it'll also have a price advantage for everybody, and that's all good.
Well, of course, when people say they compare China and the U.S., of course, rising power, different times, different powers there, where people, and of course, different types of power, like hard power, soft power, sharp power, and now, the Chinese approach is, it's not coercive, not purely persuasive, but offering, a sense of reassurance, a sense of a partnership, a kind of a warmth, maybe a warm power.
Yes, well, I think so. I mean, it's you've got to have good neighbors, and the best way to be is to be open and also frank. But into the multilateral frameworks. That China is championing the multilateral frameworks, and that's how best to do it. You need to discuss and determine what your problems are. Every country is going to have different interests, and it's how you deal with that. And so I think China's approach is a balance. It's always to balance and to strive for a harmony within the group. And this is key. And China is extremely consistent in this, and especially with all the turmoil that the tariff regime of Donald Trump and the Americans is causing. So I think this is actually, for me, I see it as, in a cultural way, I see this as a sort of a new cultural wave. And people in the countries of ASEAN, for example, maybe some of them had forgotten just how they were really connected to their neighbors. They were always looking to the West, they were always looking to America, and now they're starting to see that you can just look closer to home to see the things that are important. And part of that, of course, is the fact that there's now a real possibility to have alternative sources for technology, for IP, for licensing, for product advancements, for markets, and that's, I think, really welcomed. And I think you're going to see a lot of growth in the area, or at least in the shorter term, they're going to be able to withstand the shocks. But in the medium to long term, it's really a good foundation for even greater growth and continued growth over the long term.
Indeed, we have been having neighbors for thousands of years, Rong Ying. Obviously,
Exactly.
We do have a common stake.
Somebody said to me, it's like, somebody said to me, it's like the cappuccino. It's like the froth on the top. We've had 100 years of America during the sort of 20th century, and many people forgot that there was all this coffee underneath. And now that they're getting a shot of coffee, they're like re-energized.
Re-energized, yes. And also, I found out that Rong Ying, there's a recurring theme, during basically every stay of the visit. I think there's another, probably the common grounds or common stake among the nations, China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia. That is, from Global South, the priority is always, development, right? Take good care of your people, the nation. That's the development. But this reminds me of the vision of Belt and Road Initiative. It's also infrastructure, connectivity. It's all about development. So in that, can we say, probably is China's approach or regional countries' approach. That they have this very common practice. The priority for each nation, for every nation here, is all about the development.
That's exactly, I think, we have been talking about. I'm very much impressed by our Cambodia colleagues, panelists, their impression about, his understanding of Chinese approach, which I think makes a sharp contrast with other countries, look at the United States, how they're dealing with its neighbors. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, they have few neighbors. In China, the good neighborliness and the neighborhood
It's
policy.
part of the national policy.
Yes, has been always priority. And most importantly, for 1,000 years, particularly I think at this critical moment, China has always shared its will and will with each other by reaching out, by working together. As I say, I think President Xi's article said, together we strive and together we thrive. And by making it available through various kind of framework, of course, the overall framework, Belt and Road Initiative, but specifically with the the three countries we're talking about. But I think also ASEAN as a whole, because we're talking about ASEAN community, ASEAN connectivity, ASEAN integration, better integration, that is, I think, the approach, as far I can see, ASEAN has come up in the wake of this trade issues, tariff war. And then China, through this visit, the message is very clear. China is ready, and China is going to work with them, so that we can come up a common solution with shared sort of benefit. That is exactly, I think, what you are talking about. The question that has been alluded to. I think China, and through the visit, I think my impression is China with these three countries, but the ASEAN as a whole and the neighborhood in particular, included, that we come up with a common sort of understanding and also common sort of framework or blueprint to work together so that we can, that is the spirit of solidarity, unity of global South, of South-South cooperation, if I can say.
Yeah, and we are together for the future here. Christine, and during the visit, one thing standing out is, during the stop in Malaysia, President Xi proposed promoting a Confucian Islamic civilizational dialogue with the Malaysian side. That kind of idea echoes the broader global civilization initiative. What do you make of it?
Part of the norms that we, in Asia especially, is like to have solidarity and also to have respect. And I think the kind of like cooperations that we have established, especially in Indonesia, as the one of the largest countries with Muslim population in the world, is to have that kind of like mutual respects and from the history, from the current achievement, and also the future cooperation. And a lot of this situation has been shown by practices in terms of developing a cooperation on the education sector, for example. A lot of the scholarships that are coming from China is given to a lot of the Islamic schools, not just in Indonesia, but also in Malaysia and Brunei. And this is sort of like create a foundation for understanding and also mutual interest in developing the future together. And at the same time, you see also the situations where, especially when it comes to the situation in Gaza, is something that is quite important for countries with large Muslim populations or Islamic countries to see how the humanity of things are being sort of like being enforced. I mean, we hear a lot of talk about democracy. To be honest, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei, countries in the region, has been adopting a lot of the values, universal values of democracy, human rights, etc. But all of this situation becomes challenged. This legitimacy of this becomes challenged when you see the situations in Gaza. Even like Indonesia has been, being the moderate country when it comes to its Muslim identity. Even we found it hard to swallow what's happening in Gaza, and on the fact that it's still ongoing, despite the fact that there's been label about like President Trump wants to stop war, etc. But nothing so significant has been happening in Gaza when it comes to, pushing for humanitarian effort. Mm-hmm. And if anything, the Chinese government has shown even more real options and real achievement when it comes to bringing peace together, talk, and also having a more sort of like stable situation in the Middle East. We hope like in the coming future, this will sort of like improve as well.
Exactly, Digby. When you talk about a civilizational initiative, dialogue, it indicates equality, and being equal indicates mutual respect. Otherwise, how can you have a dialogue, right? I mean, Xi himself, correct. His visit to the three nations, itself is like a dialogue between different civilizations, different cultures, and himself, of course, is, you can say, an interlocutor of civilization, representing the Chinese background, of course, speaking to Malaysia, for example, yes. Largely Islamic background, or Vietnam or Cambodia. So that's important to nation-to-nation relationship there.
Absolutely. Cambodia is a Buddhist country. 99% of the country is Buddhist. So they see themselves as part of that kind of connection worldwide with other Buddhists. And that's very, very important. And yes, there's never been any doubt, I think, in Cambodia and in many countries in ASEAN about that approach from China. I think that's never been doubted. What people have probably questioned is, well, how does that really work? But clearly the way it works is by example. And what China has been able to do is set an example with its own population, which is diverse, religiously, ethnically, with many languages. And it's been able to do that very successfully. And so it's by deeds, not just words, that you set the example, and stability comes from that. And so that's what Xi Jinping has offered and given as an example for all of the partners in ASEAN. And I think Cambodia is very happy about that. And I think Malaysia was happy about that too. And of course, in Gaza, as our previous speakers mentioned, the line there from China has been very consistent as well. So of course, we'd all like to see that stop. But yeah, we see once again the hypocrisy of the United States in relation to Israel and Gaza. It's untenable, and something needs to be done about that from Washington. But I think at this point in time, it's the most profound source of instability in the world today, and equally, you can say that China is the most profound source of stability in the world today.
Well, Rong Ying, before the discussion, we mentioned about China probably is it's almost the only big power that stresses very much about being equal and mutual respect. Big powers usually when they say respect, you mean your respect to me, right? They don't talk much about being equal. Why China stress so much about being equal, mutual respect here?
Oh, certainly, I think it's a great
the true
point.
Sense of reciprocity, right?
Right, exactly. I think
that's the true sense of reciprocity. You really have to give it back exactly as return it. And that is the sign of respect.
Okay, go ahead, Rong Ying.
Yeah, exactly. I think certainly this is because of China's culture, the values that have been upholding. That's why it's very important for China, for the Chinese civilization to have a kind of dialogue with the other civilizations, which I think China has a huge respect. And also, I think, as a matter of fact, historically and culturally has joy, inspiration through mutual learning and mutual exchanges. But the most important thing for this visit, I think, is coincides with the 70th anniversary of the Bandung Conference, which I think now we are talking about celebration commemorating the Bandung spirit, featuring cooperation, solidarity, and friendship. And also, I think last year China celebrated the 70th anniversary of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And one of the most important principles is, of course, mutual respect and win-win cooperation. So all in all, we are not only celebrating, commemorating the past history of mutual learning, but most importantly, the exchanges and dialogue of these values of the culture are going to prepare the ground for the practical cooperation that we are talking about. And equally important that we're going to consolidate the political trust that has been established between China and its neighbors.
Interesting, Rong Ying, you mentioned about values. I'm thinking of this, in one of the articles published in Cambodia, actually, President Xi mentioned Asian values. Of course, in the 1990s, we talked a lot about Asian values. But I think, we do have a lot in common as in this region, right? The Asian values somehow as a glue, glue all the nation together with respect and equality there.
Well, yeah, certainly. I think 1990s there was a huge debate about the Asian values, what constitutes the Asian values. I think the debate is still relevant in today's context. While we Asians share quite a lot in common, and certainly we need to have kind of dialogue. That's why the global civilization dialogue, is important. But I think that our conversation of values or our sort of discussion of values does not mean we want to impose. Rather, we are in our values. Rather, we are going to have a better understanding, mutual understanding, win-win cooperation.
Yeah, win-win cooperation as a part of the values over there. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Tjhin. See you next time.